Welcome to Cowboy State Daily's weekly check-in with legislative leaders. I'm your host, Wolfson, and today we have House Speaker Chip Neiman, a representative from R-Hulett. Speaker Neiman, thank you for joining us today.
Appreciate the opportunity to be here with you, Leo. I guess on your maiden voyage into this, it sounds like. So
that's absolutely right. This is our first episode, and we'll be doing this about every week during the session. First, to start off with, for people who are unfamiliar with your background, could you just tell us kind of what led you to being in the legislature, where you grew up, and what you do when you're not serving the people in the House?
Sure. I started out born on a ranch, and I guess it would be a little bit of northern Weston County on Skull Creek. We lived there till the time I was 4 years old. My dad, he had that ranch there and when he left the Navy in 1945 after World War II and purchased that ranch. And then he drove school bus for the Upton School District, sold cars for Nairmore Ford, and tried to pay off the ranch and was raising his family. And then in 1970, we sold that property and moved to R-Hulett on the banks of the Belfouche River, and I've lived there ever since. And so I've been involved in agriculture and all things, cows and growing hay and grain, and married to my lovely wife Joni, and have raised two children, Preston, our son, and Haley, our daughter, and they're both married. Donnie, a lovely daughter-in-law, and then my daughter Haley, she found Jared Wagner, and they both live with us on the ranch, so we're fortunate we have a operation that's large enough to be able to support all three of our families right now. And then we have 5 grandchildren, from those guys. So we've got Jaden is our oldest grandson, and then there was Lucille, and then Shaylin, and I've got Evelyn, and now the last is Levi James. And so he's 9 months. So we're very fortunate. So started out in northern Weston County and live now in Crook County. So I've been in my district all of my life. And the girls and boys there, my grandchildren, are the 6th generation of my family in that area working in agriculture.
Absolutely. I seem to remember a story that I think you told me. I heard that as recently as around 2018, 2019, maybe even 2020, you were still working on a tractor every day. You had no connection to politics of any kind. Could you walk me through and explain how you got into politics, and you now, 4 or 5 years later, you're the Speaker of the Wyoming House? Walk me through how that quick transition that you made there.
Yeah, it's hard for me to wrap my mind around, let alone anybody else that's been in politics. I really didn't have any political aspirations. I wasn't involved politically. Always was a registered Republican, voted Republican. Mom and Dad were very conservative, and my grandparents. And I just never got involved in the political process. Served on school board, served on some other boards previously. I had been the chairman of the R-Hulett Airport Advisory Board when we built the airport in R-Hulett, and then also served in the capacity of building our R-Hulett Community Center board earlier. That was, pretty much the extent of it. Served 2 years on our school board there in Crook County District 1. And, and then years since then, and previous to my legislative experience, served on some weed and pest boards and things like that as, community service. But it was Leo, it was kind of an interesting thing. I mean, I was approached by a neighbor that had been a precinct committeeman, and J.W. Knuckles, and he asked me, he said, would you and Joni be willing, Thea and I are going to be, not running again for this precinct commission position, and wondered if she and I would be willing to maybe potentially put our names in to run for it. And I had to ask, I said, what is it? I mean, what do you do? I mean, what would that position even entail? I said, well, it's with the local GOP, grassroots, and you'd be outside R-Hulett, 1313 area, and you would represent the Republican Party to that group, and then you would be involved in the local county party, and then you would, have some effect or say in Republican Party platform issues and things like that locally. And I said, well, if you think we can do that, I mean, I'd be glad to serve if you think that's a thing that we could do good at. And so we did. Joni and I both signed up, went and ran, and then we got elected. And so it kind of grew from there. I mean, I got involved in the local party and immediately was asked to run for vice chair of the party. I had no experience. And they said, that's a good place to learn, because the vice chair, you're not the chair, you're not the secretary treasurer, so a vice chair is a good spot if you are in a position like that, to be able to kind of watch the process, learn about it. For whatever reason, and I'm thankful that he's fine now, but my chairman was Roger Connett. Well, Roger suffered a heart attack, and so that threw me into into the position of being chair. And that was right there when COVID and when everything else was going on, and it was just a kind of a circus trying to navigate through that when you had very little, if any, experience with that process. And but we worked through that, and Roger fully recovered, and he is still very much involved with the party there. And then, as I became chair and started to get more involved in the fundraising of it and trying to promote the Republican Party, that it was brought to me that said they would like to see potentially if I would have any interest in running for this position of representative for District 1. And there was some not everybody was satisfied with the job that was evidently being performed by our current representative, and so they came to me and they said, if you would be willing, we'd love to support you. We think you'd do a good job of listening to us and representing us. And so I did. I threw my hat in the ring, and that would have been 2019, I guess, and 2020, I guess it would have been, because I would have started my career in 2021. And I did win, and so I won the primary against my opponent, and served now, just finished my 4th year, and I'm just actually beginning my 5th year in the Wyoming Legislature. And Leo, to answer that question, I don't know. I credit any of my success and anything that I've done and the relationships that I've been able to develop. I just believe in the Lord's hand, and that I trust Him to direct my life and to lay out that path before me, and I just trust Him in those decisions, and I try to help in any way that I can and serve to the best of my ability, and to be fair and to listen to people and to respect them, and I've been successful so far, I guess you could say. And to tell you why I'm here, I guess I would give the credit to the Lord, and this evidently something in the way I manage and do things, people respond to.
You've been kind of one of the greatest success stories of the Wyoming Freedom Caucus because of you able to elevate to the role of House Speaker. The Freedom Caucus has grown with leaps and bounds over the last few years, but there's been some bad press about the Freedom Caucus, maybe some misinformation and negativity. Why do you think that maybe that exists?
Well, I think anytime anything comes against the old, way that they did things, there's always, pressure, pushback. It's not me. I mean, it's happened. I think if you look back over the past few sessions, you've seen a continual increase in the number of what I would call, I guess, more conservative members of the party. I mean, that's why I ran. I just believed that, from the standpoint of my district, I believe that my representative was not as conservative as I said that we were looking for, what I would like to have had in my representation, and that's that's how we have term limits. I mean, if you think you can do a better job or do a better job of representing, then you throw your hat in the ring and you make your case, and if the people support that, then the beauty part of our system is that then you get elected or you don't get elected, and that's how that happened. As far as why there's pushback, I don't know. I think there's just been this consistent growth in the number of conservatives. You look back, and I served with Mark Jennings in the House, and there were others that were very instrumental in the foundation. You think of Roy Edwards and Secretary of State Gray and David Miller, and a lot of these different ladies and gentlemen that were in there that were the conservatives when they were in a very small group of the 60 members of the House at that time. But it's grown, and they were steadfast and stalwart about hanging in there and presenting those ideas. And I think our country and our state has really moved more to a more conservative vein. I think that's, and I said it in my what I stated in my speech when I did my acceptance speech, and like it or not, in Wyoming, and I believe this, conservative works better than liberal. And I think I say that because I look at these different people that are moving, Leo, from different states. I think of Colorado, California, Washington, Oregon, Illinois, New York. I live in Northeast Wyoming. It's probably one of the most beautiful places in the state. We have a lot of beauty. I mean, Teton's incredible. Other places, all with their own particular type of beauty. But people are moving to Wyoming in our numbers and in our comparison in droves. And in my part of the country up there, I've lost track of how many new people have moved in, and they've moved in because they looked for conservative leaders and a state that was conservative, that would protect their rights, that would protect their private property, give them the right and protected their right to keep and bear arms. It was a lower cost of living. And I've talked to a lot of folks in the process of campaigning and being in business and dealing with folks, and they love Wyoming because many of them say it's like where I lived used to be. And they said that these people have just moved so far away from those things that were very, very precious to them. And they did their research and they looked. And I think what we've seen going back to, folks that were there earlier on, long before me, that number in those legislatures has grown. You go from 8 members back then to when my class came in, moved to about 16. And then the next group of legislators come in 2 years ago, that put it at about 24. I don't know about you, Leo, but I kind of see a pattern there. And I think it's not, some people say, oh, they're just sitting out there, they're giving misinformation, they're undermining, whatever. I don't think so. I think it's just the fact that people are coming quickly to the realization that a lot of our liberties and a lot of our freedoms are diminishing. I've got hunters that come and hunt on my property from Minnesota. And they said, Chip, he said, I just would give my right arm to live where you live. He said, because we have no voice in our state. He said, if you live in Minneapolis and St. Paul, he said, that's who decides what we get in Minnesota. And he said, we're very conservative. We're at, agriculturalists and a lot of those folks in those more rural and outlying areas. And he said, he said, the money is driving the narrative. And he said, we have no voice. And he said, I wish I could live somewhere where I knew that my Second Amendment, my First Amendment, are fully protected. He said, but I just see those things diminishing. And it's saddening. And he said, I wish I could move. He said, but I can't. He said, I can't divest what I have here and leave. He said, it's just too difficult. And in so doing, we've seen so many people move to our part of the country. It's changed the dynamic of our taxing structure, our base. We do everything based on fair market value. So we're seeing people come with money from California, Washington, like I said, Oregon, sell a home there for multiple millions of dollars. They come to Northeast Wyoming and buy 40, 50, 60 acres of land and a home and have money left over, and they just think they've hit the jackpot. And they love it. They love the freedom. They love the lower taxes. But for us, it's like, that's a relative term. It's like, you coming in here now, my property is suddenly worth a lot more, and there's going to be more expectations and demands on me. I don't have that income to be able to offset that and to generate it, and so to be able to pay those things. And it's changing the dynamic. But I think the critical thing in this is they're coming for what we have. And in Wyoming, it's conservatism. And that's what keeps getting relayed to me. So I think to hopefully answer your question in kind of a Dallas via Pittsburgh is they're coming to try to find or get a hold of the last place that they feel like as if they can come and try to protect it. I've had multiple people, and especially from Colorado, come into our country, and they watch some of our laws and they watch some of these things, a lot of this woke push that we see that's been kind of thrust upon us, and they said, please don't let that happen. Please don't let that overwhelm and take away from Wyoming, because they said, we moved here because it wasn't that way. We did our research. A lot of people will tell you, we looked long and hard and tried to make a good decision because we wanted someplace that we knew we could move that would protect our freedoms and our rights. And they said, Wyoming is where we went. And so I get implored a lot of times to please protect what we have here and don't let it go like Washington, Oregon, our coasts, and the state to the south of us, because they fear that. And so I think you're going to see, why they push back on the Freedom Caucus, I don't know. I think from my perspective, Leo, I've tried to make a conscious effort to try to not be divisive. I've tried to be fair. I tried to be very conscientious when I named my chairs, that I have non-Freedom Caucus chairmen, in an effort to try to make sure that everybody's voice gets heard. And I think that is the Wyoming way. But I think the thing that we also have to realize is that I believe the people have spoken, and they've given us a clear direction that they want us to travel, and that's a more conservative direction. If they didn't want that, I wouldn't be here. And so I think that's, if things were fine the way they were, you wouldn't see the changes that we've seen in our legislature. And so I think people are wanting to protect that, and they see that it can go away. It doesn't, you don't have to look very far to see that those things can disappear quickly. So,
you talked about some of the things that are drawing people to Wyoming. What are the challenges that you think Wyoming still faces today?
I think one of the bigger challenges that we're facing right now is kind of the restructuring of our property taxes and how we assess our taxes. I think that has a real effect. That's one of the top 5 things we heard when we went door to door. We kind of presented that plan as the Freedom Caucus, the 5 and dime, and that was one of the very, very important things that the people of the state were concerned about, is where are we going to be able to manage and how are we going to properly be able to assess. It concerns me in the way that we do it based on fair market value, is that people are being charged on basically being taxed on unrealized income. And for folks that are on fixed incomes and on a lot of even in ag or whatever, I mean, granted, ag's tax base is far different than the way we do otherwise, but, and I'm sure you don't want to go into it, but I can give you some really good information on even agriculture. And what it's costing and the cost of production, and when we start factoring in those costs on our ag lands, that it's not easy there either. And so that's one of the big things. I see a lot of concern out there about where we're going to in our legacy industries. I think with the Trump administration having been elected now, and we're looking forward to a lot more support for what we do. I mean, what do you get from Drill Baby Drill? That's meaning that we're going to go back to being an energy independent producer that is going to be selling exporter. That's where we need to be. We need to be in the front and lead on that. And I believe Wyoming has the capacity and the ability with its people, and how good we're at doing what we do, and the ability that we have to be able to produce energy security for this nation is going to thrive under this administration. And that's why I think that's a key and important issue for the people of the state of Wyoming. It pays for our schools, it keeps our people employed, it provides the dollars that we need for the long term. The PMTF and the Common School Land Fund is all been, those are severance taxes. Those are monies that have been extracted from the ground. Those are long-term investments that are paying dividends back to the state. We're utilizing those dollars to offset, to keep some of our taxes low and provide services and things to our people of our state. But long-term, we can see how those things can go away if we have an attack on our industries again. And there's a lot of different directions it can come from. The federal government, I'll give you a story. I was told by my mom, and she said when she went to a one-room schoolhouse up Whitetail Creek up there, and when they were little girls, she said for entertainment and fun, they didn't have money for toys or anything like that, so they used grasshoppers. If you ever seen those big, in the spring, them big winter hoppers that come out and they're early, and she said, and this is horrible, somebody is going to fuss, but I don't want to get them upset, but she says for their entertainment when they were little kids, she said we would take their back legs off so they couldn't get away from us. We'd pull their back legs off. And she said, and then we would put an oak leaf with a little spit on their back. And she said they were our trucks. She said we'd put little sticks and twigs on them and pieces of grass, and these things would carry stuff around for us, and they were our little vehicles. And she said us little kids would play in the sand up there and under the rim rocks, and that was our entertainment. But she says, Chip, she says, one thing about them is, she said, if you put too much on them, she said they'd quit. She said they'd sit down, and she said, and they wouldn't move. And I always equated that to what we struggle with in Wyoming. Our industries are those little trucks, those grasshoppers moving around. They can move if we don't overload and overburden them with regulation and all those other things. And quite frankly, I think that even some of that overloading can come from federal agencies and federal mandates, or even federal monies that come down that are offered to our industries to change the narrative and try to change them and say, we'll give you this if you do this, and we'll start to move you away from this, thinking that that's what needs to happen. And our industries are overloaded sometimes with those things, that sometimes you get too far one direction, and then you see an administration like the Trump administration come back in, and I think that's where we have to just be very, very diverse and fleet of foot and be able to be mobile and nimble and address those challenges. And it concerns me that our industries get overloaded with those things, and it harms our ability to really stay in business and be productive. I see that through the Trump administration as repealing a lot of that, pulling a lot of that back. I'm for people doing whatever they want to do with their businesses, and I think they need to be able to keep more of the money that they make on them. But I think sometimes the government uses money to push us in directions that they want to go. The other day, it was kind of ironic. I was talking to a lobbyist from one of the bigger green energy groups, and it was overcast at my house, and there was not a breath of wind. And he was trying to tell me all the benefits of green and solar and wind and solar. And I said, well, thank God for coal and natural gas right now. I said, because my lights are still on and my heat's still running and my tractor's plugged in, I'm going to be able to feed my cows, because if it was wind and solar, I don't think either one of those would be producing much right now. So we can't put all of our eggs in one basket. We've got to realize that Wyoming is a leader in producing energy for this nation. And to me, energy is security. And those are some of the challenges I think that we face, is we've got to protect those industries. I think we can do a better job than anybody in the world. I mean, if China's building a new coal-fired power plant every week, I understand, and ours are struggling to try to be kept going, or potentially not going to be building more new ones, I would rather we as Americans and we as Wyomingites be building those power plants, because we know how to do it. And I live near one, the Dry Fork Station north of Gillette, Wyoming, cleanest coal-fired power plant in the world. We have the technology, and we can produce energy. I mean, data, AI is moving ahead. They need energy, and lots of it, and it's growing every day. Wyoming has it. We can do it. We've got super people here that know what to do. We've got tremendous opportunity. And I think right now with this administration change, we stand on the cusp of something that can be tremendous for the long-term generations of Wyoming. And I think that's my focus. I know it is. I mean, I have 5 grandchildren, we just talked about. And what is going to be here for them? And I think as we move forward in the legislature and the bills and the legislation that we pass, and that we're talking about policy, our eye has got to be on the next generation and the generation after that. I mean, what we do, I said it in my speech, the impacts and the decisions that we're making right now are going to have far-reaching consequences long after our pictures fade on the walls of this building. And that's my admonition to my fellow legislators, so that we would look as hard as we possibly can to future generations and what we're going to do to protect their freedoms and their rights to be able to thrive and enjoy a Wyoming that we've been able to enjoy. And I'd like for all of us to keep that as the primary focus. Politics is fine. I'm not very good at it. I'm not the best at politics. I just would really just like to see us move the ball down the field, so that when we're done here and our term is up, and others that have got the opportunity to come in here and have their say about this can look back at what we did and say, you know what, they done a good job, and they protected us. They gave us the opportunity to be able to work and to thrive, and they provided the tools that we needed to be able to continue to do great things. And I think we can see it in the fact that people are moving here, and they want us to keep Wyoming, and that's our job, I think. And so they want us to protect, all the wonderful things that we are blessed with here in Wyoming, and that's, I feel, my responsibility is, and I believe the rest of the members of the House, I trust, all have that same focus. And so.
All right. You partially answered my next question, so I'll just go right into it. After your time as Speaker is done, do you think you'll have any aspirations for a higher office?
Boy, I don't know what the Lord has in mind, Leo. I don't. Right now, I am just focused on trying to be the very best speaker that I possibly can be. And when I ran for majority floor leader, I had no aspirations to run for majority floor leader. I was just glad to be a freshman legislator, just trying to figure out where the bathrooms were, and try not to fall over myself and to make a fool of myself, and to be able to have some ability to be able to speak and to be able to represent well the people of my district. And when that happened, that I didn't anticipate. I didn't expect that. As far as answering your question, what are my political aspirations? I don't know, Leo. I don't want to say, because I really don't know what's going to happen. There's a lot of very well qualified people out there, and like I say, my focus would be let's just do a good job right now as being Speaker. Let's see if the people would support me maybe moving to the Senate potentially. I mean, my Senate counterpart, Ogden Driscoll, is going to be, I don't know. I think Ogden he may or may not be done after this time, but we'll see what that happens. That his term ends in 2 years when my term as Speaker would end. I don't know. I think there's people already positioning themselves to run for that position, and going home and being able to enjoy being in a swather and chasing cows and enjoying my grandkids would be really cool. It's kind of interesting. I was interviewed by Vic Wright in Gillette, Wyoming when I was first running. I was still in the campaign, and Vic asked me, he said, "So how long do you think you want to stay in here? How long do you think you should be in there?" And my answer to him was like, "I think 6 years is plenty." I said, "If you can't get much done in 6 years," I said, "you probably better get out of the way so let somebody that can really get the job done."
That would be the end of your current term.
That would be the end of my current term. It would be 6 years. And so I don't know. I mean, it's possible. It just have to depend on see what the Lord's got in mind, and we'll just go from there. But my focus right now is I just trust him to help me to be the very best speaker that I can be for the 68th. And try to build some good cooperative relationships and to kind of, I mean, I don't believe in the kumbaya, but I do believe that we can kind of get over some of the turmoil that we've had in previous leadership cycles, and try to raise up a standard where we can respect each other and to kind of get some cohesiveness in the house. And I know, like I said at my speech again too, we ain't always going to get my way. We're not as leadership going to get our way necessarily, but I think that when we leave here that we can look back on it and say that I think we did a good job. We worked together, and we got some great ideas out there and debated, and some really good policies for the people of the state of Wyoming, because we worked hard to work together and do the best job we could, and we respected the views of the people. And like I said earlier, they've told us what direction they want to go. They want to be conservative, and they want us to listen. And so when these people speak, I believe it's our responsibility to listen and to respect that, and do everything that we can to make sure that their views and their values are followed. So that's my job.
Right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Speaker Neiman. Really appreciate it.
Leo, it's been an honor. Thank you. I really appreciate your time, sir.
Absolutely. And thank you for joining us as well. We'll have these weekly legislative roundups every week at the Wyoming Legislature, so stay tuned for more.